Welcome to the K&L Gates Working Wise podcast series. My name is Catherine Smith, and I'm of Counsel in the Seattle office of the firm's Labor, Employment, and Workplace Safety Practice area. In this podcast, I will discuss 5 tips for preventing and preparing for a union organizing drive and union representation election. Union membership has been on the decline nationwide, remaining at approximately 10.7% of the nation's general workforce in 2017, down from approximately 20% in 1983. However, in some industries and in many large urban centers across industries, it is stable or increasing. The National Labor Relations Board, or NLRB, under the Obama administration also implemented a number of changes that, in some respects, have made it easier for unions to organize employees. For example, the Obama board implemented procedures for quicker union elections. The newly composed NLRB under the Trump administration requested public comment recently regarding the election rules and suggested that it would release a series of proposed rules in the next few months to revise certain aspects of the union election procedures. But for now, the expedited election rules remain the law of the land. Under these rules, an election can occur very quickly after a union files an election petition with the board. An employer will have limited time to convince employees of its position, often just 2 to 3 weeks. So it's important to be proactive and to improve communications with employees to avoid a union election happening in the first place. If a union is able to make the required showing for the board to conduct an election, advanced preparation will enable a company to more effectively conduct a campaign in the limited time leading up to the election. There are many things employers can do to help avoid and prepare for a union organizing drive and union representation election. This podcast will discuss 5 of the key tips. First, if your company has not yet been subject to a union organizing drive, one of the first steps you should consider is confirming the company has policies in place that effectively and lawfully restrict solicitation in the workplace. Employers can lawfully prohibit some forms of solicitation by employees and non-employees, but it's important that a company has a neutral written non-solicitation policy that is consistently applied. A company may rely upon such a written policy to prohibit union members and employees from soliciting employees during an organizing drive, but only to the extent that the policy is content neutral and consistently applied with respect to the groups that are excluded. An employer must not treat union representatives or organizers less favorably than any other non-employee groups. An employer must also be consistent in enforcing non-solicitation rules. A company cannot suddenly begin enforcing the rule when there appears to be a threat of union organizing. Various forms of solicitation can be restricted. You should confirm whether your company has a written non-solicitation policy that is consistent with current labor rules and should consider consulting with counsel to craft a legally compliant policy. The second key step to avoiding and preparing for a union organizing drive is to solicit information from employees and consider what the company's weak spots are. In other words, what are the reasons that your employees might be interested in joining a union? Improving communications with employees should be a primary focus. There should be a written open-door policy, and the company should encourage employees to use it. It's also helpful to have a written dispute resolution process. The goal is to foster an environment in which employees feel comfortable addressing their concerns with management, rather than turning to union representatives to act as an intermediary. It's important to get key decision makers and members of management in front of employees. They should solicit information from employees individually and in group settings. Managers should be visible and accessible. For example, a company might consider holding monthly town hall style meetings with employees and management to allow employees to discuss their concerns and how the company could improve. Your company might also consider conducting 360-degree or upward reviews of supervisors to identify any problem managers. We've seen plenty of instances when unions were able to effectively organize, in large part because of a single problem supervisor. The objective should be to create an issue-free workplace. But the issues must first be identified before they can be resolved. An important note here: Once an employer has a reasonable belief that a union is seeking to organize its employees, managers and supervisors need to be careful in soliciting concerns or ideas for improvement from employees. They can and should, however, continue to listen and respond in a lawful manner, which we will discuss next. The third key step to preparing for a union organizing drive and representation election is to train supervisors to respond to questions and communicate with employees about the union and the company's employee relations. Supervisors are a company's first line of defense. Employees are most likely to speak to them about their concerns or questions regarding a union. Supervisors are also more likely to observe and report early warning signs of organizing. Supervisors should be advised to inform management of any union activity that they become aware of, but they should also understand that they may not spy on such activity, as explained next. The National Labor Relations Act prohibits employers from interfering with, restraining, or coercing employees in the exercise of their rights to organize, join a union, or engage in other protected concerted activity. There are consequently a number of restrictions on what supervisors can say and do in connection with an election campaign. These restrictions can be organized and taught with the convenient use of an acronym, TIPS. Supervisors should become familiar with TIPS. T means threats. Employers cannot threaten employees with negative consequences for voting yes or for otherwise supporting a union. Impermissible threats include, for example, threats that the company will need to reduce employees' pay or benefits or conduct layoffs if the employees are represented by a union. The second letter, I, means interrogate. Employers cannot interrogate or question employees as to whether or not they or anyone else signed a union authorization card or attended a union meeting or support the union. Managers and supervisors may listen, however, if an employee volunteers this information to them. P, the third letter, means promise. Employers cannot promise wage or benefit increases, promotions, shift changes, or any other benefit if the employees reject the union. This prohibition is broadly construed and can sweep in otherwise innocuous requests for feedback or ideas for improvement. Lastly, S means surveillance. Employers cannot spy on union activities to determine who is attending union meetings, or who is a union supporter, or who is distributing union cards or literature. Supervisors should also be trained to understand what they can say and do. A convenient acronym for this rule is FOE, F-O-E. This refers to facts, opinions, and experiences. Supervisors can share facts about the union or the company, opinions concerning unionization or unions, and examples, including their personal experiences with unions. A company might consider providing supervisors and managers a list of company talking points, which leads us to the next key tip in avoiding and preparing for a union organizing drive. The fourth key step is communicating the company's philosophy about the union and why the union isn't necessary. Again, the company and its supervisors can share their opinions about a union and unionization. A company should emphasize how its work environment is already rewarding in the absence of unionization. For example, a company might highlight for employees the opportunities for professional growth, job advancement, meaningful and interesting work, and the company's respect for the needs of individuals. A company should remind employees of the positive communication between management and employees and the company's history of peaceful employee management relations. It's generally okay to tell employees that the company would prefer to deal directly with the employees without an intermediary, and that the company feels employees should be able to have a say in decision-making and receive good benefits and pay without paying union dues. A company can also explain what the company is doing to make unions unnecessary, including improving the issues the company previously identified in its information gathering process. The fifth key step is to start developing a game plan for conducting a pre-election campaign. The company should decide whether to retain counsel to assist with the campaign. It should also start thinking about its campaign strategy and timing. An employer election campaign often involves multiple meetings with employees. You will want to start thinking about who will conduct those meetings and where and when they will be held. Often, employers choose to use presentations like PowerPoint slides and handouts to reinforce their points. You may want to start thinking about what those materials will contain. One important note here: although an employer can generally hold mandatory meetings during working time, no mandatory meetings can be held in the 24 hours leading up to the election. In sum, to avoid and prepare for a union organizing campaign, employers should consider 5 of the key tips, including ensuring the company has a neutral and consistently applied non-solicitation policy, soliciting information from employees, promoting the company's open door policy, and identifying the company's weak spots, training supervisors to respond to questions and communicate with employees about the union and the company's employee relations, communicating the company's philosophy about the union and why the union isn't necessary, and lastly, developing a game plan for conducting an election campaign. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of K&L Gates Working Wise podcast series. More episodes in our series can be found at klgateshub.com, and you can learn more about our labor, employment, and workplace safety practice on our main website, klgates.com. Thank you for joining us.